Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. And you can see today it's raining and the road conditions are not great. Some places where visibility is not good, and just the fact that it's raining means that it's not the best day for riding. So this is a good time to talk about motorcycle safety again. And yes, I realise I speak about it a lot, but I don't think you can push the message too often and too frequently. And a rainy day, of course, is a day for you to rethink everything that you do in motorcycling. Your following distance, in other words, how far you are from the vehicle in front of you, the braking time you're going to need to be able to slow down and respond, your exit strategy, as Kevin at MC Rider says. In other words, when you come to a situation where somebody in front of you does something sudden and unexpected, do you have sufficient room and sufficient space to get out of the way to avoid a collision? And have you given sufficient notice and time to the person behind you so that when you react to what happens in front of you, they have time to react to what you're doing? But I thought I'd talk about another aspect of motorcycle safety today, in that I've seen some commentary lately on a YouTube channel about the person running the channel had made a statement such that was essentially, despite all the things that people have done to manufacturers have done to try and make motorcycling safer, motorcycles are less safe than they ever were, and the death toll from motorcycling is rising. And I thought I would explore that theme a little bit and offer some points for consideration. In researching this, I found that in 2023, the road toll in Australia, in other words, the number of people who died in Australia died in accidents on our roads, was 1,024 people, which was an increase of 4.3% over the previous year, or 67 more deaths. I thought that one of the reasons why there might have been an increase, and I believe it was the first increase in about 30 years, might have been that 2023 was probably the first full calendar year in which people were able to get back to pre-COVID levels of driving and all of the activities that went with that. In 2023 or thereabouts, we drove something like 260 billion kilometres. That's the total number of kilometres driven by everybody in Australia in the calendar year. So that's an awful lot of driving. If you consider the lockdown years and the COVID years when people were not working at all, or they were working from home, when schools were closed, and when you weren't allowed to just jump in your car and go for a drive and so on, obviously the amount of vehicles and the number of kilometres being driven and so on were reduced over those years. So one of the factors that may have led to an increase in the road toll in 2023 was simply that a return to the pre-COVID levels of driving. Another factor that would have perhaps led to that increase was the fact that there are more people in the country. Immigration is bringing more people into the country, and this is not a discussion about immigration, it's simply stating a fact that there are more people in the country. More people means more people driving means more kilometres, more people driving more kilometres means increased potential for accidents and therefore increased potential for fatalities. On top of that, the national fleet increased by 1.7%. In other words, there were 1.7% more vehicles on the road in 2023 than there were in the previous year. More cars were being bought because there were more people. More people, more cars, more travelling, all leads to greater possibility, or the greater potential for accidents, and therefore the greater potential for fatalities. One of the things that I think is a problem in modern cars, and I've spoken about this in previous videos, is the advent of infotainment screens. Now, I don't criticise the screen so much as the way it operates, in that many of the features of many cars these days are operated through the infotainment screen, and if you want to do things, you've got to navigate through menus on the infotainment screen the same way as you'd navigate through menus on your tablet or your iPad. And while you're doing that, your eyes can be off the road for up to 10 to 12 seconds. When you're travelling at 100 kilometres an hour, that's dangerous. It's dangerous for you, and it's dangerous for other people on the road. The features that drivers try to access, like the speed sign recognition and the lane control and the vulnerable pedestrian alert and so on, I personally think most of those things are good things. They warn people of things that they are doing in their vehicle, or their vehicle is doing, or that they are around their vehicle that they may not be aware of. Consider, for example, if you turn off the blind spot recognition and a motorcycle is in your blind spot and you're about to make a lane change or turn a corner or something like that. The blind spot alert warning you that there's a motorcycle where you can't see it protects the motorcyclist and obviously protects your vehicle. So it isn't the features so much as the fact that they can be manipulated while the vehicle is in motion. And I've suggested before that either you turn off everything before you start the vehicle, and every time you start the vehicle you have to do it again, so it becomes like a pilot checklist, or they are only activated by a voice assistant such as a Siri or an Alexa or something, or they can only be activated when the vehicle is stationary. So if you want to do a certain thing, turn off a certain alarm, you've either got to tell Siri or Alexa or whatever the name is to turn it off, or you've got to stop the vehicle and do it. Now, in relation to motorcycling, it was suggested that things like putting ABS and traction control and cruise control and various riding modes on the motorcycles were not making motorcycles safer, and that, as I said, road deaths were increasing. In 2023, of the 1,024 people killed on Australian roads, 247 of those were motorcyclists, and that was an increase from 222 in 2022. Now, given what I said about motor vehicles on the roads, I think all of those things apply to motorcyclists as well. I don't think you can say that ABS or traction control or cruise control or riding mode in itself has made the bike less safe or has made riding more dangerous. Motorcycling is an inherently dangerous activity in the first place, with only two wheels and small contact patches between the rider and the road, and no protection other than the equipment you choose to wear or not wear. If you have a state like Missouri where the compulsory helmet law was abolished, it's predictable that there will be an increase in fatalities. Of course, that hasn't happened in Australia, but what has happened is if there are more vehicles on the road, it's reasonable to assume there are more motorcycles on the road. If there are more motorcycles on the road, there are more kilometres being travelled, more kilometres, more motorcycles, more people, greater propensity for accidents, greater potential for death. But I think that there are some other unique motorcycle factors involved in this matter that are worth at least putting as a point of view. I think that motorcyclists can probably be divided into three groups. One group is those people who get a motorcycle licence or when they're about 17. In other words, as soon as they can, they learn to ride a motorcycle. They go and get their permit and they pass the riding test, and then they buy a motorcycle. When they're young and 17 and when they get their first motorcycle, they've got to get a LAMS approved one, so it's under 650 and so on. And then as soon as they get a full licence, they get a bigger motorcycle. Some of those people may have jobs that they go to after school, and they need the motorcycle to get to and from that, or the motor scooter to get to and from that, or they may be doing food delivery, or they may be attending university, and a small motor scooter is a good way for them to get to and from their home and university and so on. I think that group is the 17 to 25-year-olds or thereabouts. Now, we know that 17 to 25-year-olds are disproportionately represented in all sorts of accident statistics involving injury and harm and accidents, whether it be in motor vehicles or any other sort of behaviour. And that is because 17 to 25-year-olds tend to see themselves as being bulletproof. They tend to take greater risks than other drivers, and they also tend to, obviously, simply by their age, to be less experienced despite the training they've done to get their driver's licence or get their motorcycle licence in the first place. So it's quite possible that just that group and their inexperience may contribute to some of those deaths that I've mentioned earlier. There's a second group of motorcyclists, and that is the people who are those in the 17 to 25-year-old age group. I think that somewhere around the the early 20s to mid-20s is when some of that group get rid of their motorcycles because they've either got married or moved into a partnership with someone, and they've realised that they don't need the motorcycle anymore, or they perhaps need two cars and a motorcycle as an extra toy they can't afford, and so on. And so they get rid of the motorcycle, and whilst they keep their motorcycle licence, they don't ride for a long time. In fact, they may never come back to riding. There's a second group of motorcyclists who are those people who always have had motorcycles. So they've gone beyond the 25. They've perhaps got married or got into a partnership with somebody, but they've kept the motorcycle. Maybe they and their partner both have a car, but they also have the motorcycle. As they get older, they become less prone to bulletproof behaviour, thinking of themselves as being bulletproof, and think of themselves as being, they become more experienced, a bit more mature, and less likely to do the dangerous and risky things that they were doing when they were 17 to 25-year-olds, and they look after their machines, and they ride with all the safety gear, their full leathers, gloves, proper shoes, helmet, so on and so forth. That group of riders, they do everything to protect themselves and their machines, but the one thing they can't do, and they can't work against, is what everybody else is doing on the road. They can't control the behaviour of drivers who are distracted by their infotainment screens. They can't control the behaviour of drivers who are just inattentive, or playing with their mobile phone, or don't understand the complexities of motorcycling, or don't understand that riding a motorcycle involves a lot of skills, and time and distance and so on to stop the motorcycle is equal to time and distance is required to stop a car. And car drivers make rash and foolish decisions sometimes which have an impact on motorcyclists. The third group of motorcyclists would be the midlife crisis group. That would be some of those 17 to 25s who now are in their late 40s or early 50s, or even perhaps a bit older. The family's grown up, the children have left home or gone to university or whatever it is, got a jobs or whatever, and the person who previously had a motorcycle and had kept their motorcycle licence decides now, I'd really like to get back into motorcycling, and they decide to buy themselves a bike. Because they have a full licence, they buy the Harley they always wanted, and this is not a criticism of Harley. They buy a big bike, the one they've always wanted, so they can go out on the weekends with their mates, ride, take a road trip, stop somewhere and have some lunch and shoot the breeze, and then ride home afterwards. And what they frequently but not always do is buy the bike and figure, well, what can be hard about this? I remember how to ride. And they get on the thing and they start riding, and eventually it all comes back to them. What they probably should do is take a refresher course, first of all, a stay upright course or an advanced rider course or something like that, just to make sure that their skills are as they thought they were when they were in their 20s. One thing they have to accept, but is difficult when you're having a midlife crisis, is that they're not as sharp and their reflexes are not as good, and their reaction time and all that sort of stuff isn't what it was when they were 17 to 25. And so they need more thinking time, they need more reaction time, they need to have greater distance between themselves and the person in front, or the following distance, and so forth. And because of those factors, it's more likely that those mature age riders are going to be involved in accidents, sometimes because of the factors that I've just said, and sometimes because of the factors that I mentioned involving people in cars who are not paying attention to the road and so on. Now, all of that said, I think that those factors have an influence on the road toll, and I don't think that it's reasonable to say, well, putting ABS on the bike has made it less safe. What might have made it less safe is if you put ABS or traction control or riding modes, sport, eco, or whatever it would be, on a touch screen in the middle of the dash, where you have to take your hand off the left handlebar and touch the screen to change the menu. So if you want to engage the sport mode or the eco mode or whatever, you've got to use your hand on a touch screen rather than using switch gear on the left handlebar. Your hand is off the handlebar, meaning you've got less control of the bike, but your eyes then become fixed on screen to make sure that you tap the right icon, to make sure that you're drilling down into the right menu and getting the response you want. So if those features like ABS or traction control or cruise control or whatever else it is, riding modes or anything else, are in a infotainment type touch screen, then that contributes to the motorcycle being less safe, because it requires the rider to take their hand off the handlebar and to take their eyes off the road. I think if you could talk to people who are old enough and ask them about days when motorcycles had drum brakes on the front and rear, for example, they'd all tell you that having a disc or two discs on the front and a single disc on the back is much safer than having drum brakes, even with twin leading shoes, as were the option on some of the more advanced bikes. I think that anyone who has traction control on their bike, and the Spiders certainly do, would tell you it's much better than having the bike fishtail in wet water on a wet road because you gunned the throttle or you lost grip because there was too much water on the road. I think that anyone who rides a bike would tell you that ABS is a much safer thing that stops the brakes locking up and stops the rear wheels skidding, and also stops the front wheels dipping dramatically and you ending up over the bars because you had to react quickly to a braking situation. So to say that those features have made the bike less safe, I don't think that's a fair assessment. I think that how those systems operate, whether they operate through a touch screen or not, whether they are permanently engaged or can only be disengaged when the bike is stationary, some of those features like the traction control and the ABS and so on cannot be disengaged on the Spider, and other features that are part of the riding modes can only be accessed when the bike is stationary. Once you've got going, some features just aren't available, and that even goes down as far as what radio, whether you can have AM, FM or your auxiliary input or whatever. Those are my thoughts on whether motorcycling is more or less dangerous. It is an inherently dangerous activity. Wear the safety gear, be extra cautious on wet roads, make sure you're visible, and of course obey all the road rules. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the commentary and the scenery. If you have any comments, please feel free to offer them in the comments below.